Good evening. Welcome to CCA and to tonight's lecture. My name is Nathan Lynch. I'm the chair of the ceramics program and the curator for the Design and Craft lecture series. That was easy. Following tonight, our next lecture will be Chihiro Shiota on October 12th over in Oakland at 7:30. Theaster Gates is here tonight, and I promise it won't be much longer than that, but just a little bit. He describes himself as an artist, a musician, a cultural planner, and an urbanist. In the last year, he was a Loeb Fellow at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. He performed and exhibited at the Whitney, at the Armory Show in New York, the Milwaukee Art Museum, the Pulitzer Museum in St. Louis, and the Contemporary Art Museum in Houston. Now, when he's not making art for museums, and this is taken directly from his website, but there's a little phrase at the end I want you to pay attention to. When he's not making art for museums, he's committed to the restoration of poor black neighborhoods, converting abandoned buildings into cultural spaces that allow not only new cultural moments to happen in unexpected places, but raising the city's expectations of where placemaking happens and why. He's the director of arts and public life at the University of Chicago. Now, how many of you, it's now dark, so I may not see your hands, but how many of you were at the Craft Forward lecture that he gave in the spring? I think I see like 12 to 16 hands. This evening is a gift for all of you that missed that. It was a special event, and we wanted him to come back. Now, I found my notes from that symposium, and the phrase that I wrote down that caught in my head the most was ceramics production as a choir rehearsal. Ceramics production as a choir rehearsal. That makes me so excited about ceramics and music and everything else. And I have so much appreciation for what Theaster is doing. It's sort of difficult to describe without coming off as an after-school special or some kind of fan mail. But I think what I want to say at the end here is just that when you witness great art, or you're around, I won't even say a great artist, but a leader or a great person, it is inspiring and exciting in a way that makes you want to go away and make work, that you say, I want more of that. I want to see more work like that in the world. I want my work to change the world, to affect people in that way. And that's basically what I felt last spring, and that's why we wanted him to come back to speak to us tonight. So thank you for coming back. Here's Theaster Gates.
I was just about to go all the way around, but I'm not going all the way around. Thanks so much for having me here. It's super cool. Oh, Nathan's super cool. And all of you are super cool. You guys have caught me kind of in a funny moment where what my practice means to me is in question, and what it means to be productive is also kind of a big question, because for so many years we can, as people who make things and believe in them, we can make and there be no interest in our making, and because of that non-interest, we're left to our own devices to kind of keep making. But then what happens when people become interested in the objects that you make, and that as soon as you make the thing or before the thing is made, there's this interest in owning the object that you've made and in consuming it, and that you get to a point where you're not sure if the thing that motivates your making is your desire to make, or that there's this audience for it. And so I hope that in addition to the fun we'll have for the next 52 minutes or so, that you would allow me also to be really candid with you about the history of my art practice and how complicated it is to be a person who has to have had to imagine how one survives in a racist and economically disparate world, and also try to have a set of things that you believe in, things that come out of your body and from your hands. And so it will move between kind of practical admonition and confessional, and maybe some letters to a young poet or something. I will start like I often start these days, by singing, and I will also end with someone else singing, and I will start talking about clay, and I will end talking about clay, like dust to dust or something, or like ashes, like wood ash, I've got bowls, jars, teapots, sell my wares. As soon as, like, when pots were $25, people thought it was so cute that I sold clay objects. They were like, "Oh, Theaster, it's so awesome that you're a potter. I'd love 4 of those." And you're like in the neighborhood and teaching these kids, and now objects cost, Allison, they cost so much money. People spend so much money on fire hoses and on parts of abandoned buildings. And I know that what they're buying isn't just the 450 pounds of concrete and the $7.50 worth of concrete and the 1/1000th of a portion of the building that I've just destroyed. I think they're trying to buy a little bit of Theaster. And so art and artists have this strange place where part of what we do is that we provide the fetish objects that people might believe. And that if you take that challenge seriously, that part of why a person might be interested in a thing that you have to exchange is because they want to believe both in that thing and in you, becomes this really loaded kind of experience between the person who makes the thing and the thing before it gets to anyone else. So anyway, I got a lot on my mind tonight. That some potters really want to make pots because they believe in making pots. And that should be okay. And that sometimes a person feels compelled to do one thing for their entire life. That should totally be okay, right? And that there's something about these processes that have their own histories and legacies and orthodoxies, and then the possibility within the parameters of that discipline to deviate just enough, not too much, that you would still fit in the confines of the discipline, that your colleagues might esteem you, that your friends might adore you, they might be jealous, that you could find your own moments of celebrated ecstasy as a result of your capacity to make a thing. I was that kind of potter. That the only community that I had interest in was the ceramic community and their respect for my work. And it never came. I studied, I traveled, I had a very nice studio, and the objects that I chose to make I could never do the ritual just right. You know, like I would always like, you know, go bottom before I go top, or like I'd touch the dipping font when I was supposed to like zip my pants, or like I'd wear the wrong robe on the wrong day. It was Easter and I thought it was past. I mean, I didn't know what to do, you know. And so I ended up with this interest in the East, and but at the same time, you know, when I talk about the East, it's like the romantic craftsman. But I think I was also interested in like not the like East of like the 1700s, or like when Great Britain finally learned how to speak Mandarin. I wasn't interested in that moment. I was actually interested in like, how did these motherfuckers take all these jobs from black people in the U.S.? Like, really, how did craft move to China? And like, you know, like, it's like, we're just gonna pack up our shop. We're not gonna even pack up our shop. We're just gonna move, you know. And that there's a set of people who work cheaper than black people. This 79, 86, cheaper than, you gonna work cheaper than black people. Now, I didn't realize that all that time while I was shopping at Montgomery Ward's and something would say made in Thailand or made in, that it wasn't hitting me that maybe Sears Roebuck had in fact found a new labor pool, and that my great aunt, who may have worked for Sears or Spiegel or Montgomery Ward, was in fact, when her job went away, it wasn't replaced. That all of a sudden, like I had this kind of intimate curiosity and this kind of fetishistic relationship with the East, and that it was also posing this problem for any blue-collar American person, which is, where in the fuck am I gonna work? But it's only now at 38 that I have a clearer sense of like all of the things that are at play, when I'm both confused by how things went to the East and fascinated by the tremendous labor pool, the tremendous national ethic that was like not entertainment engagement first, not celebratory practices first, though they might be in there somewhere. That there was a commitment to like hustle, you know, things that at some point were very important to lots of different kinds of people in America. I wanted to like figure that out. I wanted to understand that a little bit better. And the easiest way for me to enter was through the things that had been written, which was largely ritual-based and British men talking about their exploits in Japan or in China. And so I read it. And then sometimes I would read it with a British accent. A drunken British accent. I wanted to relate those experiences that I had learned to things that were much more familiar to me, right? So Sunday, church. We get there and Deacon Bond would sing every Sunday, you know, these Dr. Watts. When I rose this morning, vibrato is very important. I said thank you, Lord. Vibrato, like he would sing it. He would, yeah. And that I found that like it wasn't just Chinese people, wasn't just Japanese people or Jews who had rituals that were important. It's just that the rituals that I had as a black person weren't always named rituals. They weren't always absolutely formal. They weren't absolute. Deacon Bond sang, and if nobody caught Deacon Bond singing, one might think that Deacon Bond never sung. And so it was on me to start to invent these rituals, if not invent them, to name them, to label them, to kind of hold them up alongside other rituals that were very, very important to me. And then what happens if I could then fuse the rituals that were very, very familiar to me with rituals that I was getting to know? Right? What else could I do with this orthodoxy besides exclude myself from other interesting communities? What else could I do with this material clay that might extend itself past the clay studio and into the world? And that question became bigger and bigger. What else can I do with my body? And, well, how can I extend my body? What else can I do with my creative practice that might have a little bit more of an impact? So I decided that I would stop selling ceramic objects, and that what I would do instead is use them as I hope many of you do, that the objects become a way of extending. They became a way of extending myself, and that instead of one person having the opportunity to consume the object, maybe many people could use the objects, and I'll come back to that. Around 2008, I could no longer afford my ceramic studio. The kiln, the soda kiln was $1,500 per firing. My studio was about $350 a month at Lil Street. I lived on the far south side. Lil Street was on the far north side. That the spatially, psychically, the city, it just wasn't possible. So I said, I'm going to give it up. I'm going to stop being a potter. You know, and around the same time, I probably also stopped going to church. And then I probably stopped going to our Christmas gatherings. I just kind of like dropped out of all of the orthodoxies of my life. And around that time, a guy who collected old things from the neighborhood I was from said, you know, he had these boards, these boards that you're looking at. Some of you guys have heard this, but I basically used these boards, and they just kind of followed me for the next 3 years of my life, and I kind of committed to them. And so this is where I think where I've been talking about belief in two ways. One, as a kind of ceramic orthodoxy, and then belief as a way of kind of connecting one set of values to another, cultural values to another set of cultural values. I started to actually believe in an object. That what I found was that Christianity had given me the capacity to be a great believer in things that I didn't see, and that the thing could be Christ, or it could probably be anything. And once I attached value to that thing, I could probably believe that the thing had the capacity to do anything I might will it to do. That if I believed God could move mountains, or a ceramic object could move mountains, or a wooden object could. And so I started to use the wooden objects to construct spaces for believing. And I would believe that the object had the capacity to make the space, and so I would propose this to curators. And then I would move through museums and try to extend my belief in the objects toward the objects, and then invite people to also believe with me that the objects really were from the west side of Chicago. They were in an industrial company, Wrigley's, that hadn't been used. The building hadn't been used to make chewing gum in 20 years, and there were 10,000 of them. And I've said before that Wrigley's just didn't know what to do with all these brown boards, and so they were just going to burn them. And I think that if this world could have burned niggers, this country, after the 400 years of very strident use, they probably would have. And maybe the Civil War was a a good opportunity to use black people, and maybe other wars, Vietnam, Cambodia was a great time to use yellow people. But what do you do with the people? What do you do with things that you don't need anymore? You know? And so I was kind of using the boards then as this kind of metaphor, and then reactivating them as a way of kind of psychically imagining that these boards might have one or two more use values that I could tease out. And I think I started to build a practice around that, kind of believing in objects and then teasing out a new strategy for usefulness, that they might enter the cultural world or enter a very normal middle class to low living blue collar world, that we could make shelving out of this, and we could make a radiator cover out of it. We could eat food off of them, and we could decorate a museum with them. We could burn them as firewood if things got that deep. That I wanted to really to ask, then, is it not the artist who has the capacity to reimagine that things could be used as something other than the thing they were born to do? And that maybe buildings could do things that they weren't intended to do, or that zoning policies said that they couldn't do, or cities could be reimagined, transformed by an artist, by an architect, by a designer or a builder, to reimagine itself not as Disney World, but as something that sits adjacent to Disney World that does a different thing. That in fact, the very religious institutions that failed me, that probably gave me the capacity to talk to you guys today, that maybe the religious institution that I've grown to feel distant from might have other ways of being engaged if an artist or designer or creative person was willing to engage the system and understand its strategies and structures. And so I set myself not at an orthodoxy of a material, but instead the capacity to understand how systems work. I don't know why I feel so heavy tonight. All of a sudden, I feel so like intentional and metaphoric. But I hope that this has some value for you guys. And so I decided to stay with these materials that have been out of the world's interest, right? So, I mean, since these might be the same images, I figure I may as well give a different talk. So the fire hose, right? And which is the object that I'm using most right now, decided that just talking about materials is not interesting to me. Just talking about architecture as form, or urban planning as a practice, or ceramics, and only waxing on the material was not interesting to me. That in addition to the material, I wanted to have the capacity, I wanted to use the material as a vehicle to maybe talk about something else. So I bought a fire hose manufacturing corporation. And then I had a lot of fire hoses. And then I was like, oh shit, what am I gonna do with all these fire hoses? So I was like, I'm gonna help people believe in the fire hoses. And my shop team was like, how the fuck are you gonna do that? And I didn't know. So I called my gallerist. You know, here I go with the gallery thing. I say, gallerist, I got these fire hoses. It's like we all, I got a good idea. Right, I got these fire hoses. And he's like, yeah, great. You know, great, that's awesome. Go with that. You know, Theaster, baby, try it. You know, see what happens. You know, we love you. You know, things are good. Try it out. And I was like, all right, well, he was like, well, what are you gonna do with them? And I was like, nothing. I think I'm just gonna like, you know, just like put them in and like, you know, just like. And he was like,
Okay, go with that. Build it out, see what happens. And some really cool things happen. So let's assume that like the acquisition of the Fire Hose Manufacturing Corporation was an act of faith, right? Like me activating that like spiritual thing again, like, because this makes no freaking sense. But then I started to think like, I've been in this conversation about abandoned buildings, and I could locate a moment when America understood the challenges of civil rights and the need for a more civil society. We could call it summer of '63, Birmingham, Alabama, Bull Connor, fire hose, firemen, policemen, German shepherds, peaceful blacks and Jews and whites thinking together about how this country could be more equitable. And that at that point, the whole world knew that America had a couple problems that it needed to work out with itself and its former labor. That the fire hose became the moment when things started to loosen up. Policy for affirmative action and more equitable ways of learning and studying. Pell Grants came up, and there were like all these incentives in places. And at the same time, Oakland, right? Panther stuff starts to like germinate, like to kind of like, okay, oh, y'all want to put fire hoses on the motherfucker? Oh, I know what to do with that, right? And it's like this moment is like maybe the hose, if the hose is like clay, the hose becomes the vehicle by which I talk about abandonment, right? That because it was in that moment that then where WASPs didn't want Jews to live, stuff started to shift and open up. So Jews could move from South Shore to Wornick, which meant blacks could move from the west side of Woodlawn to South Shore in those nice big buildings where the Jews had lived. There's this whole group of black people who had enough money. There were just housing covenants that kept them from living there. And then everybody, like over the next 30 years, everybody just kind of kept shifting up. Well, not everybody. A lot of people kept shifting up. St. Louis, Baltimore, Detroit, Chicago, Minneapolis. All these places, Philadelphia, all these places that have been. So I found myself as an artist, not only interested in my particular art practice, but really kind of thinking more with my urban planner hat, like thinking about systems in cities. To the point where on the Black South Side in Chicago, North Omaha, North St. Louis, North Milwaukee, East Milwaukee, West Milwaukee, like all these places where abandonment had happened, it was just because there had been so much attrition, so much, that then there was like nobody to occupy these really beautiful buildings in certain neighborhoods that didn't have the best schools. And then there I was, making new fetish of these beautiful abandoned buildings that nobody else wanted. And I mean, I could go anywhere in the country and find one of those neighborhoods. Every neighborhood that we not from or might be from had those buildings, and so I found myself wanting to take on the building as the object in question. There was something about the relationship between this thing and this thing that felt like a kind of a planner's poetic. So I decided that I would kind of step out of the kind of museum space and concentrate on real places. And I started, renovating these buildings and just trying to once renovated, say what else could they be besides
rental unit. And I was trying to make a case to cities, to the city of Chicago, but also to cities in general, that maybe the building type of a 2-flat could do considerably more than just house 2 families. That maybe that building type, if we were to look at a kind of urban typologies of building structures, maybe that building type was actually ideal for other things. And in fact, if we would choose that building type over a 30,000 square foot Target or a 50,000 square foot community art center, this 2-flat that already exists, whose light bill is $20 or $30 or $75, $100 in the wintertime for heat, this was maybe actually a more sustainable practice, and that several of these types of buildings in abandoned neighborhoods that had a severe abandonment might be the kind of Kickstarter you need over the big building, the big box. So I started to populate the buildings with cultural life, a record store went out of business. The record store sold me these albums. They were cheap, so one building became the listening house. University of Chicago got rid of their glass lantern slides from the art history department. So I reinforced the building, and we now do poetry slams that are based on the entire canon of the history of art, from rock drawings, rock paintings to Picasso. And after doing a few of these buildings, there were other kinds of larger scale problems adjacent to my block that really required tremendous resource, right? But the way that the resources in cities were normally leveraged by developers and planners, they just did the most mundane shit. And this is again where, like, I'm talking about an artist's ambition, like an artist's ambition beyond, like, in the same capacity that we have to think about painting, or kind of moving paint and transforming blank canvas. There has to be a relationship between blank canvas and blight. Not for everybody, but for me, I'm saying that this act, one's capacity to transform is huge. One's capacity to reimagine creatively the use of a stretched piece of canvas and a couple of pieces of wood could potentially translate in the creative reuse of abandoned buildings at a very, very large scale. But it has everything to do with our capacity to dream and to imagine that we are the ones that should be in that conversation. So these 36 units that were abandoned a block away from me, I had been looking at them for years, saying, like, there has to be something we could do. There must be something we could do. And I knew my alderman was going to tear the motherfuckers down, because she had just gotten this, like, $18 million TIF, and she was trying to get a Target, and the Target didn't want to have any low-income people in her neighborhood, and she didn't want to have any low-income people in her neighborhood. It's like, that's your cousin. You don't want your cousin to live on the block where you the alderman? Your cousin. But this is what happens when one becomes part of a class hegemony and is no longer interested in the shit that's outside of their class. When you think that there's something that you have because you went to a fucking college and studied art, and like all of a sudden you don't talk to your auntie no more because she ain't never been to a museum. You better love your auntie, and if she makes macaroni and cheese with bacon bits, you better eat that shit. Y'all know what I'm saying? I can't talk about all this. It's like time to go. I got 8 minutes, 7 minutes. Anyway, so I started thinking that maybe, okay, I'll be fair. The thing that I'll say about this was that a 36 unit, $10 million project is too big for me. I can't do it by myself. I have no interest in doing it by myself. 4,500 square foot space at LA Mocha is too big for me. A 26-unit building at Documenta is too big for me. That all of this is hinged upon my capacity to understand my limitations and the capacity of others, and my willingness to engage others and invite them in as friends and collaborators, partners, and employees. I knew that these buildings were owned by the Chicago Housing Authority. I knew that the Chicago Housing Authority had preferred vendors that they deal with on projects. I knew that if I could get to a preferred vendor and get a vendor excited about that they might have a better chance of getting hold of these buildings and getting the ear of the housing authority than I would as an individual artist in a land where people are excited about targets more than they are individuals. So I found the developer, Rich Sciortino, Bryn Shore Development Corporation, master planner of the Chicago Housing Authority. Said, Rich, I'm an artist. There's a set of buildings in my neighborhood that might qualify for a low-income housing credit. Can you come look at it with me? He came, he was like, Theaster, this is beautiful. Who built this? This looks like a Stanley Tigerman, 1963. It was a bad year for him, but they're okay. They're okay. You know? Rich, oh, bless your heart, Stanley, like you my dog. You my dog, UIC, baby. So he looked at him and he said, well, we should approach, what are you thinking? And I said, well, maybe there's a way that we could, instead of talking about mixed income all the time, we could talk about like shared interests. You know, maybe there are maybe there are artists who don't make a lot of money, and artists who make a little bit of money, and artists who make a little bit more money, who are all interested in living in this place. And that instead of saying that geography is the thing that binds them, and that a person who spent $400,000 on a crib has to feel comfortable living next to somebody who spent $175 on a crib per month, then maybe we could say we're all interested in art. And that we could take those 36 units and then have 6 of them become like the art space, and then like do something like maybe I could use the tax credit and what would have been profit for Rich to create a new center without having to like do a capital campaign. I was trying to leverage the real resources. I was trying to think creatively about how city structures work, y'all. I am an artist, but I'm really interested in how our practices are transformative practices. So here's the thing. So these blocks, and then this block, and then we're gonna take this and turn that into the art center space, which is this part right here, right? We'll put another story on it, make it glass, keep those old growth trees that have been there for 40 years, trick them out. Some ADA accessibility, keep it, and then we'll phase it so that the not-for-profit, anyway, there's so much to talk about. We phase it so that like we will gut this, and then it'll be like an art project. Like we'll invite designers and artists, and we'll do this the first year while we're waiting on the $10 million to come from the state. Get people jizzed about this, and then like get that $10 million and like bam, and then like, and this is Dante. Dorchester's the next block over, and that block, I'm trying to buy that block. I'm trying to buy like every abandoned building. I'm trying to like scoop it up, because if I don't, somebody from California who never comes to Chicago is gonna have like a Chicago portfolio, and it's gonna be like, yeah, it's like, well, I own property there. Which is cool. If you out there, I want to know you, because if you own some shit on my block, I'm fucking you up. And so what the CHA got excited, because then they could say, well, who's going to be the long-term partner in this project? And then my developer, who isn't interested in programming at all, he's interested in making the developer's fee and owning a set of buildings that 15 years from now might have more value, because Theaster is going to help him have more value. And he can say, this artist, we're working with this artist, and this artist has been buying buildings on this block.
Now, in this process, y'all, I got 3 more minutes. Self-imposed. In this process, I'm also learning all this other stuff about like land trusts and cooperatives and like, right? So if we can scoop up the building from Deutsche Bank for 10 G's, I tell my neighbor, look, we can get this building for 10 G's. It probably needs like a new HVAC system. That's going to cost you about 35, but then past the HVAC, we can help you restore the building and make it, like we can trick it out over time. But you get the building, you get the bones, get your roof tight, everything. So then it's like, well, we can't afford that. He asked, you're the only one who work for the University of Chicago. But then maybe there's a way that we could choose to make a trust that has like a set of these buildings in it. So if the inevitable happens, which is Theaster comes to California, he does this, this talk to a group of white people. 7 of y'all move to Chicago. You're like, holy shit, I want to work with Theaster in Chicago. I'm gonna buy one of those $10,000 buildings. Dad, can I get $10,000 to buy one of those buildings? Can corporation, can y'all make my roof? That if you buy one, I'd be happy to help you. I like white girls. It's cool. Like, I'm open. I'm a really open, and we're all open, men. You're really handsome and stuff. But if you end up there's like, Theaster Gates got a couple buildings. Dorchester Projects got a couple buildings. The Dorchester Land Trust has ensured that like the sons and daughters of Dorchester circa 2012 have access to these buildings, and if they're creative types, they can always like work that thing out, right? It's like an endowed scholarship. It's like you're right. It's a new form housing covenant. That is but they call that a mission-based not-for-profit. I don't know. So I no longer wanted to practice like Matta Clark's. I wanted to be Gordon Matta Clark. I think I did. I was like, he died at 35. I'm 35. I'm 38 now. I meant that. And so I was really excited in St. Louis to just like chop the rest of the building up. Right? Send it back to the Pulitzer. And it's like, Emily owned one of those. It's like, if Emily owns Gordon Matta Clark, I could chop up a building down the street. How much is that worth? 250,000? 500,000? She only liked big things. Well, don't we all? I'm not going to talk about that. Okay, so I am going to talk. So, have you guys anybody been to Omaha? Is there anybody from Omaha in the audience? How many people been to Omaha? Right. How many people came to Omaha through the Bemis Art Center? Yeah. So the Bemis Art Center invited me to Omaha. We found $25,000, and they were like, Theaster, we raised this money with you. Would you please come and do a project at the Bemis? And I said, no. Please, no. No, thank you. Can we not do a project at the Bemis? Can we use the $25,000 to have, we called it the town hall, I don't know, the town hall meeting, something real innovative. And we used the $25,000 to talk to poor communities in North Omaha and Council Bluffs, kind of adjacent Iowa spot. And what we found was that there were these black artists in North Omaha who were struggling, who would never get into Bemis because they were never trained like you guys are trained. And so whatever the Democratic group of advisors were, they would never choose that work. The jury, the work wouldn't bubble up high enough. And so there's this disconnect between the Bemis, which is a fairly progressive place. So I said, well, we need to support these brothers and sisters. And so we went to the city. City had a bank called Carver Bank, first black bank in North Omaha. They gave us the bank. And then Susie Buffett, had a group called Sherwood Foundation. Sherwood Foundation was doing some work in North Omaha. they bought these buildings that they were going to tear down. And they said, well, we have these buildings and we don't know what to do with them until we start the redevelopment process, right? So there I was again, kind of artist, developer, broker. So it was like we activate the bank, we gut one of the buildings, and then Susie Buffett says, you know, well, we're gonna redevelop 200 acres into low-income and affordable housing. You know, maybe there's something to be done, right? So then it's like, okay, well, I could either choose to run the art center, or I could choose to make a ceramic object, or I could be the master planner for a $48 million project that would allow me to take the Great Plains Black Museum, which is without a home, and their shit is like water damage from water coming through the roof. I could either feel bad for them, make an art project out of their work, or leverage the fucking low-income tax credit to give them a new museum. And so every project I have to decide, like, do I want to do the gestural thing, or do I want to like do the most ambitious, most fucking capitalistic thing possible to like have this real cultural intervention happen? And it sucks, because every day I want to be in my studio. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here right now. I don't want to be working for Bamuti. I haven't seen my studio in 4 weeks. You know, I gotta like fly to LA and like touch shit that I've never touched because somebody else casted the concrete. It's like finally I can get around a fucking gas kiln with some concrete. I can't even pour the concrete myself. But there's something else at stake for me, y'all, that allows me to kind of move to ask the question like what can these hands do? And part of what they can do is make really interesting objects, I hope. But the other part has nothing to do with object making. Thank you. Can we talk in the light? Anyway, that's all I have. Or there's some more images, but I'm not going to show them. Oh, shit. Okay. Just one more, just because y'all should hear Dana sing. So I said I would end with ceramics, so I should do that because I said I would. I did this project at Kohler where I was trying to connect production, you know, the point that Nathan was making. That for a while when I didn't have the capacity to make pots, I just kind of sang about them. And I did a body of work around this potter named Dave, and I invited these really amazing musicians and vocalists to African Americans mostly. It was a Facebook choir. I just kind of like reached out. I was like, I want a choir. Can y'all want to be a choir? Want to be a choir? And so we sang about the production and slave production, which is like both Dave, the slave potter, 1850, and like my guy Mike, who works at the Kohler Manufacturing Company, which is a family-owned corporation that makes ceramic objects.
Thank you, guys.
Children will want to live in the house that we own, that they grew up in. I don't know if I want to live in Winchester all my life. That I don't know if my neighbor, if given a better opportunity, wouldn't also want to leave the block for a better opportunity. And I can't control that. The thing that I'm attempting that is a little less than utopia is just the thing that exists today and the thing that existed yesterday and might exist tomorrow, that those things have the right to live next to each other. And that it doesn't have to be a constant erasure of things. But if a Jewish person decided to live on my block today, I'd have the right to my black neighbor to say, look man, they sold you the motherfucking house 40 years ago. That in a way, like a great monument, it moves through these cultural moments that come and go. And that if I didn't learn anything else in planning, it's just that cities change and they are cyclical. And that those who want to live in a place today won't want to live there 40 years from now, potentially. And so I struggle with that. The thing that I'm dealing with, I'm working on a play right now with a Bay Area artist named Mark Joseph. And we're asking this question about if all the time funders are asking us, what will the legacy of your project be? And we can't always answer this. And I'm putting that question of metrics and standardization and value for future up against the Black Panther Party. Started in Oakland. Hugely successful. Galvanized the world. The fucking FBI dismantled it because it was just a little too effective. And that my nephew has never heard of the Black Panthers. That there was a serious cultural dismantling that happened in this great cultural moment. And there's nothing that I could have said to Hutton, little Bobby Hutton, about like, what will you do to ensure that this food security thing that you started today will last 40 years from now, right? So I'm struggling with this question. Now, obviously, little Bobby Hutton has had some impact on me, right? But that what I'm so excited about was that there was this revolutionary act in a day. And that the thing that they were preoccupied with was the importance of that revolutionary act. And that then the byproduct of revolutionary act is physics, or is karma, is karmic, or is circumstance, or is strategic dismantling. Which any of us might be victim to if we get too good at the things that people don't want. I don't have that problem right now because I'm an art monkey. My museum says, please have a show, I have a show. The gallery says, please make more art, I make more art. A collector says, please sing, and I sing. I don't have a problem. The minute that I choose not to do that thing, or the minute that those things start to get in conflict a little bit more than they are today, there's gonna be a dismantling. I'm gonna fuck the wrong 21-year-old. I'm gonna smoke marijuana in the wrong city. I'm gonna drive too fast. I'm gonna steal my best friend's idea. They'll find a way to dismantle it. And so the thing that I try to do is use popularity for this moment to both gain money and stature and value, cultural value, and then understand all the time that this thing that I'm building will fall. And when it falls, and I become a nobody, and no one asked me to come speak at a place like the CCA, that there would have been enough money stashed that the breakfast program could like still happen into perpetuity. That what I have that the Black Panthers may not have had is a friend that knows how endowments work. Wow, sorry. Please, lighten it up.
I'm curious about your thoughts on gentrification. I figure you have.
So this was the part of the planning book that I didn't read. The old Mayor Daley in Chicago was really, really effective, and the new Mayor Daley too, at having black people replace black people. So that where we could normally identify gentrification as a thing that like white people are displacing other people, white people are displacing poor people. When you couldn't say that, when it was like, oh, look how great this is. Like, there are these new homes that are $270,000, and there are all these new people, and they all go to this church down the street. This is an awesome community, right? But what you don't realize was that like the Dailies understood the class piece, right? And that they were not interested in poor people living in the city. And they have strategically over the last 3 decades moved poor people to the margins of the city, not unlike Amsterdam is attempting and Paris has done successfully. You keep those immigrant folk and those poor folk, and all that conversation about being a world city and the idea that we want to compete with the rest of the world cities, that we want our Pompadous and we want our great forms of public art. All that shit is about kind of attracting a sameness that allows for a particular kind of healthy economy. Not an economy that's actually based on like vermin and rats and dogs that eat rats and bears that eat dogs. But it's like, we all just want to be rats. It's just like have a world full of rats. Boring. And I think the part that I'm starting to believe is that gentrification, kind of that word, it implies a particular kind of unintentionality. And that if we could be more intentional at a governmental level, at a neighborhood level, that we could do a lot to kind of create healthy economies and healthy neighborhoods that have a mix of people. In Chicago, there's a chocolate factory that's in a warehouse district. Factories around the warehouse district went out of business, and people bought those apartments as lofts into the $400,000 and $500,000. Once they were there, they started to complain that there was too much chocolate. The scent of chocolate was in the air. They would try to sue the chocolate company for its scent. And I like it because I like this model because these were young lawyers who had moved into these lofts who were using the one big tool that they had. It wasn't their cocks. That there was this way, and that feels like a particular kind of industrial gentrification. A kind of like that this thing that has been doesn't have the right to be anymore as a result of my being here, right? If I can define. And so there has to be an intentionality that says, oh my God, I'm moving into a place that has a chocolate factory. Awesome. It's like, I'm moving into a black neighborhood. I'm moving into a Hispanic, I want to learn cumbia. Now, the Bay is different, you know, because white people in the Bay like being around everybody else. In fact, if there's too many white people, they're like, you know, it's all white people. Oh, I love that, you know. It's like they don't want too many. So there's like some self-policing, like, oh, no, homegirl. I don't know if I answered, but help me out.
Well, I'm wondering about you know, that artists are usually like the stewards of gentrification. An artist moves into a neighborhood, you kind of know things are about to change. And so I wonder if you think that there's such a thing as good gentrification and what the artists do.
Yeah. Okay. So what's really cool about the 3 neighborhoods that I'm working in, well, less St. Louis. In Chicago, there's enough psychic fear of the black South Side that people ain't ready yet to move. So no matter how much exciting stuff I do, they'll be like, awesome, you go, boy. That is really awesome. You know, and they'll give a little bit of cash to the foundation, but they ain't really, you know, they'll support like that, which is cool. And so what we have to do is like keep amplifying the amount of gun violence that happens in my neighborhood. Police brutality, you know, like, and I often say that like when white girls walk down the street, the policeman will stop them first and be like, are you here for crack? You go back to your own neighborhood. You know, and it's like, it works, you know, speak aloud. But in some ways I am a symbol for gentrification. And it's totally reasonable that that whenever you do good work in a place, other people will want to live there, right? And I think that that's reasonable. What I found to be the case, though, is that lots of young black artists feel more conviction in their art practice and have more desire to not move to the white place. Like to not move to Pilsen or to not move downtown. They're like, we can do this. We can do this. We can do this right here. You know, and that's exciting. So 2 things are starting to happen in Chicago with this little 3-building. It's just 3 buildings. It's 3 little buildings. But these 2 things are happening. One is that the city's starting to think about how can we shift our policies so that it can accommodate more of this kind of cultural activity in small buildings that are abandoned, which is awesome. And then people of color are saying maybe there are other ways to have a practice that isn't necessarily in mimicry to the School of the Art Institute contemporary practice. And maybe there's some other things that are important to me that have value, right? So in some ways, I just have to like take the dumb road and be like you know, I'm a Virgo. Like, I hear people on the West Coast talk a lot about their sons. I'm a Virgo, you know, which is like, you know, always trying to do some model heroic shit. You know, always just a little bit bigger than just the thing that I'm doing. But that's just kind of how I'm wired, right? So I think that it's really cool that now young men and women of color are asking like, well, did you go to art school or did you go to planning school? Or like, how'd you learn about business and money? Like, can I meet some of your mentors and maybe they could be my mentors too? So that what happens then is like on my staff, you know, I have cultural workers and it's a really diverse community. My whole staff knows that my mission is to help support artists of color in communities of color. And they all believe that that mission is important. And so we just roll with that mission. And it may mean that I need some white cultural workers on the block to help me carry out that mission. But those white cultural workers and those builders, they're also taking on mentees, like young folk, to help, you know, so that like, but yeah, ain't no white people yet. Yeah. But they own stuff, but they will own the stuff in their portfolios. See what would happen? I would call up a realtor and I'd be like, hey, I'm interested in 6904. And they would say, oh, it's owned by somebody in California. It's not available. And Deutsche Bank was selling whole portfolios to people in California. So if we were talking about the issue of ownership, the gentrification's already happened. If we're talking about who you see on the block, but that's how white people roll. It's like, oh, I'll own it and I'll just sit on it for 10 years and like I'll just wait, right? Because you can play that waiting game because you got enough money in the bank. You know, this ain't just white people. Like, you can bankroll it. When the windows come out, you can say, oh my God, you know, Uncle Sam, I had to spend an extra $10,000 on windows. You know, those black people hate, man, they're like, they love throwing rocks. Right? So, if you look at it like that, the thing that is inevitable may have already happened way in advance of the work that I'm doing. Right? And then I just become another part. But I think that this idea of having other mechanisms that ensure that a set of buildings are used with some intentionality is one way of thinking, one way of using the tools of legal structures to try to have some efficacy.
Has business followed you? Like, have people opened up small businesses around what you're doing? Have the people who live there sort of come up outside of the art thing?
Yeah.
And also outside of the gentrifying force, like, have the communities been interested in that?
Yeah, so it started. And I'm also really interested in small businesses, like incubating them, making space. Like, who can get their hands on $20,000, save some kinds of people, and then an artist who gets money from the art world? So, like, there are these moments where I can afford to, like, front a project that costs a little bit of money. But now, what's interesting is that, like, Serna, Knight, Kresge, MacArthur, NEA, HUD, they're all interested in this relationship between economy, place, and culture. And so there's this extra interest by the philanthropic community to identify people who are doing this kind of thing, and then identify, well, not exactly parasitic, but like projects that dovetail, and often cafes and bars dovetail creative spaces, and then also ambition to renovate larger buildings that have a mixed use designation already, which helps you figure it out. If you're 20, by the time you're 35, that 15 years you would have figured out how to have a good cafe. And that might be the amount of time necessary to help that the cafe grows as the community wants coffee. And then I'm also trying to like start small businesses intentionally and then turn them over. And like, so one of the buildings, I'm going to use the guts of the building, send that to Documenta. So that got the demolition got paid for. And then I told Serna, I'm going to use the first floor as the Black Cinema House, and they were like, awesome. And then Art Place gave me a grant to do this Black Cinema House, which would be like a 20-seat theater, and then a film person can live above it. And then all of a sudden, where we haven't had a theater in 40 years, the Film Study Center at the University of Chicago, Facets, the Chicago Film Archive, all these folk are saying, we'd love to meet that audience, and we have all of these films that we never show. So it's like, the rehab on the first floor is $100,000, and to run the program is $40,000 a year. And it's 20 people, and then it's like we could go from that house, and then 3 years later, we could go to the empty bank on the main street a block away, and would have developed enough street cred 3 years from now that the cafe grows as we have a desire to drink coffee. But I'm still at the beginning of that, and I'm not a business, like I've never done a pro forma or a business plan, and probably won't. I'll probably just like eyeball it. One more.
Okay, this is maybe a bad last question, but you mentioned that you fell out with the church. And
Oh,
but then
goodness.
not to talk about how you fell out.
Oh no, I don't mind.
But so you're talking about having spaces where people can come and believe with you.
Yeah.
So you're still kind of thinking about church?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So is there stuff about church organization when you're developing these community spaces that you're using kind of, or, I mean, a church is something that people build together often from nothing
Yeah.
to benefit all the generations. And so is that part of your model?
Wow,
for-
that's so good. Yeah, I mean, that's good. Okay, 3 answers. And then we should go, right? I mean, the first one will be short. That the falling out was because historically, the church had more responsibility for more cultural life, or it was much more of a steward to the entire needs of a person, or of a people, or of a place. And over time, it became less and less useful. And then there were more and more social organizations that took on sections of need, really specific sections of need, right? And some churches still. So what I found was that the church had an identity crisis. The churches that I was engaged with had a bit of an identity crisis. Not unlike other spaces that used to have, that used to care for the whole person and was having to be, like museums, don't know what to do with people right now. Because there are so many other things to do in a city that satisfies all these different parts of a person. The museum is like reimagining, like, well, what is my purposefulness? What is our institutional purpose if these people are fulfilled without us? I think so I had this dilemma where there were other kinds of institutions that seemed to be taking care of more of the whole person, and the churches that I was involved with, they were only interested in this 1 or 2 parts, which was like, there were all these other things that I had interest in. So my songs of like political, like, God is a Democrat, he is, that didn't always go over so well. And they would say like, that's a really awesome song, but it doesn't really share the love of Christ. That's one answer. And then the second and third had to do really more with like, I also left my planning job at the Chicago Transit Authority because the people that I wanted to serve most, the bus routes that went to those neighborhoods were cut. And it was my job to communicate why those bus routes were cut. And the communication was bullshit. So it's like, how can you ask me did you hire me to deliver? So, I'm that nigger. Like the sweet tongue nigger that helps them understand, like, we ain't got no choice but to tear this line. And I'm like, you ain't got to cut this route. You ain't got to change the green line to the pink line. And it's like, I can't work here. And I found myself like, I got a good job that's doing all the things that I don't believe in. And so I had to figure out I had to find a new profession. I had to figure out, and I had to quit my job. My mom was like, don't quit your day job. Go